How we doing?
It kind of freezes in the most inoperative sort of moment when you're like, what am I gonna do?
It's the first time, first date. It goes.
You can send it. I can send that to your email too. Hold on just a sec. Let me do this first one at a time.
So I figured out what it is. So what you do is you stop
Yeah,
video
stop the
and
video
start
and
again.
start it.
If it does that,
Yeah,
your
I
video
noticed a couple times.
freezes.
Yeah, she already came and did that at the first meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, come on, wake up.
Do you want me to?
So where are you now? You got stop video? Is that the order you put in here?
Yeah, that's what you put in if it freezes up.
Oh,
But right now, I can't even log in.
so we're ready to go. Okay. I will now call to order the special city council meeting of March 20th, 2023. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person meetings in council chambers. Public access to the meeting is also available by telephone by using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Meetings are broadcast on Channel 8 for Comcast and Xfinity subscribers and on the city's YouTube channel online. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Manhiramasa. Here. Councilmember Long,
Here?
Councilmember Hadamio,
Here.
Councilmember Kondo,
Here,
Councilmember Goff. Here. Councilmember Brown will be absent. Councilmember Walker.
here.
Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are going to kick off tonight with our first resolution. It is CR 50, Ward 1 City Council Member appointment. So welcome to Megan. And I believe, Joanna, you want to read the fancy part?
A resolution approving a Ward 1 member to the City Council of the City of North Glen, Colorado.
Is there a motion to approve?
Move for approval?
Second.
Is there any discussion on this item? Just be welcome. So please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 50 passes unanimously.
Excellent. So I would like to invite our municipal judge, Amanda Belhash, I believe, oh, there she is, to administer the oath of office to our newly appointed council member, Megan Burns.
Raise your right hand. I, Megan Burns. Do swear. That I will support the Constitution of the United States of America. The Constitution of the State of Colorado. The laws of the State of Colorado. The North Glen City Charter. And the ordinances of the City of North Glen. And I will faithfully. Perform the duties. Of the office of council member. of the City of North Glen. Upon which. I'm about to enter. To the best of my ability. Congratulations.
And, yeah, do you want to hold that up?
Look official.
Ready? 1. Sideways 2.
Okay, well, I would like to invite Councilmember Burns to join us on the diet. So I wanted to give you a minute if you had any special guests to introduce, or if you'd like to say anything.
Hi to my family watching from the East Coast and Colorado. Wouldn't be here without you guys. My dad is my inspiration for being here, so thank you.
Welcome. And now we jump right in.
Okay.
Okay, the next item, response to citizen inquiry. City Manager Guyer, do we have any updates?
Nothing this evening, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additions or deletions to tonight's agenda? Nope. Okay. Next up is public invited to be heard. This is an opportunity for public comment on any item not set for public hearing. Statements are limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Statements must be related to city business and limited to matters of community interest. Joanna, is anyone signed up to speak to council?
There's nobody signed up in advance.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who didn't have a chance but would like to speak to council tonight? No? Okay. Is there anyone on the phone who would like to speak to council? You may press *6 to unmute yourself at this time. Okay, we will close that and move into council communication. I'm going to begin with Ward 1. I will start with Councilmember Burns. Do you have any updates for us?
Just very excited to be here. I've been council member for about 90 seconds, and so this is great.
You're off to a great start.
Thank you.
Councilmember Walker?
I testified on CBS 9 for our new safety-sensitive zones. I want to thank Miss Diana and Miss Heather. They did a great job helping with the interview. I think the story went very well, so I was happy to promote that, and thanks to all of you guys for helping to get that through. And then also, I'd like to look for a consensus from council to get appointed to the Outside Agency Funding Committee, if anyone has any issue with that.
Good.
I didn't hear that.
The Outside Agency Funding Committee, I'd like to rejoin that,
Okay, got it.
and that is it.
Okay.
So is there,
Well, I have a question about that. I think it, because we have a new council member, what other seats? We want to make sure she has some committees as well. And do we have that on the agenda for the next meeting possibly? To fill those seats?
I don't believe we have it on the agenda yet, but we can add it.
Okay.
I can't tell you off the top of my head. Joanna, can you help with that? So you're pulling up the
Which ones are
list.
open? Oh,
So
OAF is open. I'm going to borrow her note. She's more prepared than me right now. So Historic Preservation Commission was held by Ashley, and the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, and OAF, and then Colorado Communities for Climate Action. She was the oh, that's what we have on, or it's just vacant.
Yeah, that-
That wasn't her spot. It was
correct,
vacant.
yeah.
Got it.
And the, yeah.
Okay. So I'm thinking, since you raised it, we could talk about it right now and then just bring it to a vote at the next meeting. Does that work, Joanna? Is that okay?
I
Okay.
would be happy to shed some of my boards too.
Oh, he's like, I'll get rid of some. Well, I think the first question is, if the remaining ones, so the Historic Preservation and Parks and Rec, if those fit into your schedule and you wanted to take them on. Okay, so sounds like Councilmember Burns can fill in to the two that are vacated, and Nick has expressed interest in the other one. I think that might be the simplest way to move forward. Does anyone object with that?
Does anybody want NADA or the Adams County Regional Council? I'll just put that out there. Those are on the board.
What are
Like
those
you're
meeting
looking at
dates?
me.
Thursday mornings.
He's looking at me.
And
Oh, okay.
I don't know about the Adams County, that assignment.
Might be interested in the
Look
Adams
at your
County one.
notes again.
There you
We've
go.
got, she's got the notes.
Thursday at 7:30 for NADA.
Thursday,
7:30 a.m. Let me
yeah.
clarify.
What was the other one that you had available?
I'm the alternate to Adams County, as the regional counties.
Oh,
Sub-regional.
So,
Yeah, we don't even have that one documented, so that's probably okay, 'cause I
that's
think
fine. That's
Councilmember
fine.
Long is gonna be a rock star, so we'll be
Okay.
fine.
You think so? huh?
So is NADA something that's hard for you to keep?
Yeah.
So 7:30 on Thursday, I know I can't do it. Anyone else? Any
That would be
takers?
the,
So we have,
I'll do it.
woo, look at that, are you sure? As he pours himself a glass of water, I like it, okay. So I'm hearing a volunteer for NADA. Fourth Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Yes?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Okay, anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, it sounds like if we have support for that, thank you for your notes. If we have support for that, then we can add that to the consent agenda at our next meeting and vote those positions in. Does that work?
It does. Can I just point something out just for clarification, so
Yes.
there's no confusion next time? So we do have the Adams County Council of Governments Subregional Transportation Forum on the list. And so I just want to make sure that Councilmember Jaramillo is the representative, Councilmember Walker is the alternate representative for that board still.
Yes, I was
That's the one I
elected
said.
Shannon, take
Oh,
vice chair.
so she will take the alternate. Mayor Pro Tem will take the alternate position?
Okay.
And you're keeping both, I hear.
yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
It was recommended by
Yeah,
Commissioner Odericio.
I think that's great. Right, well, thank you, Councilmember Walker, for getting something checked off our to-do list as well during your communications. Do you have anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Councilmember Jaramillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nothing to report. Just want to wish everybody a happy first day of spring.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, we all need that. Councilmember Condo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to welcome Councilmember Burns to the days. And as a fellow marketing person, I feel like I have a kindred spirit now on my left. Not that it's indicating any kind of bias of any kind. So last week, Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa and myself, we attended at the ADCO Health Human Services Building a briefing on Proposition 123. And I believe, Councilmember Jaramillo, you attended as well. There's one more session that they have, I believe, on April 10th. That's a Monday, that they're going to try and reschedule to accommodate, because we're meeting on Mondays. And I would strongly encourage you to go. I thought it was very useful in that it kind of Reader's Digest, if you will, or Prop 123 for dummies. But it's really not about the state kind of taking home rule or local control. This is more of figuring out how to give out monies in exchange for commitment, and they're non-binding commitments, I might add, to be able to plan for the development and also fast-tracking, if you will, the approval. And you're shaking your head, Dr. Goff, so it sounds like you're also in the know, of affordable housing. So the nice part about this, if I'm reading it very simple, in a simplistic way, is there's opportunities to access monies if we make some sort of commitment, but we're not necessarily bound to it. There are minor consequences if we don't meet the commitment. We get a timeout for about a year. But it seems to me it's pretty lucrative opportunity for the city. So, again, I I would encourage you to go. I thought it was very enlightening. And that's what I have.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I wasn't here for the last meeting, so I may be going further back, but on March 8th, the art committee for the City Hall met, and just some very exciting developments that I know our residents are going to love when they finally see the final project there. And then the next day was the meeting with our new Economic Development Director, Allison, is it Moding? Is that how we pronounce her name? Moding?
That is correct.
Great. And so I wanted to welcome her, and I think we got a really good person working for us in that spot. And that's really all I have. That's it.
Okay. Councilmember Long?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I want to say welcome to our newest council member, Burns. Welcome. I have some things that are a little bit out of the ordinary, but that's part of my charm. I attended the Native Americans Indigeneity Denver Powwow celebration this last Sunday, and I was very taken with the people there. Curiously, many of them are locals, and I had some interesting conversations with respect to Northland. So I just wanted to share with you that their perspectives are very interesting, and I laud and support everything they stand for as they try to continue their Native American heritage in their own way, which I totally applaud. The other thing is on St. Patty's Day, I had an interesting get-together with a group from Longmont, small businesses, and I was brought to understand that the city of Longmont has a sponsorship for something called the Longmont Public Media. And with permission, I'd like to perhaps share this with Diana Wilson as an idea, also to let the city manager know what I learned from that austere group. They sponsor small businesses when they want to do media protocols or anything outreaching into communications with their various constituents. And dare I not steal the thunder from my fellow Ward 4 member on a particular citizen issue, I'm going to defer to her just now and perhaps step back in if she encourages me to do as such. We've had a very interesting situation with dog care. I'll leave it at that. So thank you kindly.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Luke Mann-Hiramas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I have three things, but I will start off with what Councilmember Long just referred to. I have a request from council for a study on Rover businesses. So if you know what Rover is, or maybe you don't, Rover is a dog sitting, dog care, dog walking type of business that folks can go online and, search in your area to find care for your puppies. The issue is that we don't have a way to regulate that here in Northland, and there's nothing in our code that allows for that. As it stands right now, our code says that, there is no doggy daycare or kenneling allowed in residential areas. But with the Rover businesses becoming more and more popular, it is an issue that we ran into, and it is an issue that we will continue to run into for sure if we don't kind of get ahead of it and take a look at potentially what other cities are doing in terms of Rover businesses, because they're not regulated and there's no stipulation to say, how many dogs they can have. So it's kind of competing with our code right now. And it was an issue that came up in Ward 4. So for our constituents' request, we would like to bring that forward for a future study session to see how Rover fits in with the city's codes and what that looks like in the future.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
It came up.
Okay. And then the other two things I have, I won't say too much about it because Councilmember Kondo did go ahead and give the brief, but I also attended the Rocky Mountain Partnership meeting. And I came back with a clearer understanding of Prop 123. It was demystified for me just because we've seen it and we know there's stipulations, but how do we meet those stipulations? So I would encourage fellow council members to attend the next one. Councilmember Kondo, it was already rescheduled for April 12th. They originally had it for April 10th, but that is a big city council meeting day for many city council members. So it'll be moved now to April 12th from 4 to 6 p.m. And last but not least, I attended the North Glen Senior Organization meeting today. They're a wonderful group as well. It's a little bit late, had a dentist appointment, and my face was numb, so I didn't speak very much. But I would encourage everyone, if you have donations, to please drop them off for the food drive that is ongoing, looking for non-perishable items that go to Immaculate Mary and Good Shepherd. That's all I have. Thank you. And welcome to the new council member. I can't not say that. Welcome.
Excellent. Okay, I had the most fun on Saturday at the Mayor's Mingle. We try to do these every now and then, and we changed up the format a little bit, which I really liked. So I'm going to kind of summarize a little bit of what happened because one of the commitments I made was that I would share all of the feedback with you. So if you see the yellow posters over on the other side of Councilmember Walker, those are notes taken. So residents were divided into groups. They sat at tables and they did a lot of reflecting on things that they want us to keep doing, they want us to stop doing, they want us to revise, and then what were some hot topics or big issues from their table. It was a really great way to get input and also to have open dialogue about things and to actually do the mingling part of mingle with the mayor. In the past, it was really presentation focused and one hand at a time. So we did a little presentation about the City Hall project, and there was some questions. Some of their feedback were sort of passed as the day to change, but they got a good look. And as often happens, sometimes the more vocal voice seems to be the driving force, but there were some people after that came up very calmly and said, hey, we love the net zero idea, we love the design. So there was balance to the feedback. But themes over there, I really want you to take time on your way out today to look at it. My ask is that you would be in support of handing these over to staff and letting them look at trends. One of the recommendations I thought was really smart, which was take the notes and then go through and do kind of an FAQ that is actually available. So I talked to so many people, I want to say probably 10 to 15 that said, hey, our big focus is that this information doesn't just disappear. And so someone even wrote at the bottom, please don't let our input fall on deaf ears. Like we want to know that something was done, that it was heard, and that even if the response is, no, we can't fix that right now, that's okay. They just want to know that we heard it and that staff is looking at it. Common themes, homelessness, shopping at Safeway, really scares some of our residents. They've had interactions with the homeless population, and so they're nervous about that. Speeding, roundabouts, all sorts of stuff. So on your way out, if you would just skim it, but what I think would be great is if staff could just take a look at it, maybe summarize it into themes, and if we could get some sort of, even if it just says, ongoing project. There's some questions specifically about specific residents, not residents, but homes or addresses that are, don't have anybody living there and are falling into disarray. And so they have some concerns about properties. And so I asked them to be as specific as they could, and so they have. So is this something that council feels is an okay ask? To just kind of ask staff to summarize the notes and provide kind of a place to put the response. Does that make sense? Councilmember Kondo?
First of all, yes, I agree, we should do that. I would support that. I did neglect to say in my communications that I actually did a walkthrough of Safeway on Saturday,
Okay.
but that was at noon. And it seemed like it was pretty innocuous in my observation. So I would be very interested in receiving some input on when I should be going through Safeway and when I should be driving in the back of that shopping plaza, because I want to make sure I'm targeting the right times. But definitely in agreement.
Heather, how do you feel about that ask? Does that seem like an okay thing? Just to summarize the notes and maybe find a way that we can respond? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, thank you. I think it's an appropriate ask, and what I would ask for some flexibility on is, given the upcoming NLC trip, if I could get a couple weeks to work on this and coordinate responses from staff and really identify items like Safeway where we're going to need to put our heads together and come up with some new approaches, new options. Safeway in particular has been a challenge, but we have been working closely with them. So Chief and I had a conversation just this afternoon. So he was at the mingle with the mayor, as was I, and so we were brainstorming some ideas. Would council like me to bring staff's responses back as a discussion item or a study session item? I would need direction there. Or would you like me to simply email council? I think I would lean on bring it back to a public meeting, so that's one venue where residents know we're being responsive. And then I can talk with Diana about doing something in an upcoming Connection newsletter.
I think that would be great. And
Okay.
the other thing to hear is that one of the keeps was ward meetings. They really like ward meetings. I feel like that's a great way to interact with all of us, so. But it's definitely worth taking a peek. Councilmember Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. A perfect transition. I was just going to ask that if this could kind of be a living document from what we bring back from our ward meetings too. Put in there too, also from our presidents, say also.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand correctly. Councilmember Walker, you're suggesting that as we move forward with ward meetings, that other council members employ this strategy. So we need to, Diana, is she in the room? Make
Does
sure
everybody
you're
want-
making note of that.
I don't know so much if we want to do the whole post-it thing, but there are usually a few hot topics that come out of every board meeting. So I was thinking, we're not going to come out with this.
Okay.
We might come out with 2 or 3, but if it's okay to add that too, in case they weren't able to make that day with the mayor.
Yeah.
That's a little.
So you don't want to do this at your upcoming ward meeting?
No, ma'am.
But when hot topics come forward, you want me to document those and then share those with council?
And I'm hoping
Got
we
it.
can get those like in our first round of board meeting as we're getting started here soon.
Okay, understood.
Well, and what I love about that is the phrase, "a living document." Is this something, like maybe even a tab on our website we could add, which is like a resident input FAQ kind of thing that is constantly being updated so that we can tell residents, hey, thank you for your input. Immediately, that's where it's gonna go.
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
Diana?
You know, we do
Diana
have the
Walker.
town hall. Remember when we talked about the new marijuana
that's
laws, or we
right.
had whatever, we have that one page where we can post and add. So we can put it on there, but I think the most important thing is putting in the connection and putting on social media of, did you just go to the mayor mingle? Well, you want to look at the answers to the questions? Here, go here. And it also gives people a forum if they want to comment on it or ask their questions, if we put it on that document there.
I think that's great.
Okay, so yeah, we'll plan on that.
Okay, thank you. Does everyone else feel okay about that? Thank you. And that is, oh, no, I had one more thing. I got the coolest email today from the Government Finance Officers Association. So the city of North Glen received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. So, well done. All right. That is all I have. City Clerk Small, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I would like to welcome Councilmember Burns to council, and that is all I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. City Manager Guyer?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Also, welcome to a newly appointed Councilmember Burns. Happy to have you. 2 items for council. One, in relationship to the direction you provided me on the dog daycare. I do want to let all of council know that I spent quite a bit of time with a resident who attended the mingle with the mayor on Saturday, and committed to making sure he understood all of the information that we have. I will keep him in the loop, and so he can attend future conversations when we're at a point to bring back information. Councilmember Long and Mayor Pro Tem Lukman Hiramasa are also connected with that individual, so I'll do my best to make sure I keep a pulse on who needs to be informed when we're ready to have a study session on that topic. May seem a little out of place given that it's spring, but I'm going to share this update with you regardless. Our holiday lights are a lovely addition to our community. And recently, I was given feedback about the outages that we experienced this year, this past year. So even though it's spring, we are already thinking about the fall, winter months ahead. So I wanted to share with you that we did identify that 8 fixtures along 104th were experiencing outages this past year. Those were reported to Excel. So unfortunately, Excel's response time was not on par. So we will work on proactively leading up to this next winter season, making sure that we do our best to push on Excel and make sure that the outages aren't there anymore. Parks has provided me with specific language in terms of what they're going to do, so I'm just going to read that to you briefly so you're aware. Parks will evaluate the location of poles currently out and submit them to Rob. He will put in the request for them to be repaired with Excel. Parks will also look at the current ornament pole lights to ensure that they're functioning properly. Parks will also purchase 10 backup timers to ensure they are working appropriately. We will ask facilities to have an electrician with us when we install lights for the holiday season so they can determine what is malfunctioning and hopefully repair any issues at the time. Any lights not working, we'll go ahead and purchase them now, so we'll have them ready to go for the fall, winter months. We'll do another check after we have confirmation the lights have been repaired, and then again in October to be ready for installation. So staff is taking additional steps leading up to the fall to make sure that we have functional light poles as well as ornaments. Thank you.
City Attorney Hoff.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Welcome, Councilmember Burns, and other than that, I have nothing this evening.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have 4 resolutions tonight. The first one, CR 49. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A resolution designating the safety-sensitive zones within the city of North Glen pursuant to North Glen Municipal Code, Section 7-1-15.
Move for approval?
Second.
Okay, City Manager Guyer will provide a summary.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This will be the final presentation that you hear on safety-sensitive zones for a year, pending approval by you this evening. So this is an exciting milestone to be at this point. This is the last step in terms of formal implementation of the program, and then in the coming months, by June, we will officially get the program up and launched. So Council Resolution 49 is before you this evening, which is the designation of the zones. We've been before you several times before tonight, asking for input and consensus on the location of the designated zones. So this is a short recap of where we've been up to this point. Thank you for the approval of the ordinance on February 27th. And then you can see below the program launch will officially take place in June. The flashers are on order. Are they in yet, Kent? Not even close. Okay, so the flashers are on order. And as we committed to council previously, we will, when we set up each zone, establish a baseline and do reading of data with those flashers that are going to be implemented. And then we'll revisit that in a year. These are the recommended locations for the zones. So we received council consensus on each of the 4 zones. 1 zone in each of the wards is the place where we're going to start. And then as we move forward, after a year, we we will review and assess to make sure that the zone is working effectively in each area, and then have conversation around implementation of additional zones. As we've shared in the past, we don't believe the success of this program is going to be based on number of zones, rather the strategic location of the zones themselves. This is the safety sensitive zone signage. If there's any questions about the signage, we have talked about this quite a bit. I'll bring Kent Kisselman, our Director of Public Works, up to talk more about the signage, but this is the work. These signs will be done in-house. We have the capabilities to do that. And then the flashers, which is the sign to the right, those are the signs that are on order. There will be 2 of those within each zone. With that, staff's recommending approval of CR 49 this evening. I do know that the city attorney does have an amendment to the resolution language. When you look at the resolution, you can see that there's very specific reference to the locations of where the zones start and where the zones stop. So I'll turn it over to Corey to explain that amendment.
Thank you, and Madam Mayor, members of council, they are very minor, but at the end of section 1, after the word follows, I would recommend adding the word with the specific boundaries to be designated with signage pursuant to section 7-1-15 sub D of the North Glen Municipal Code. And then throughout A, B, C, and D, adding the word approximately, because the way the signage works, essentially the specific location of the sign is where the safety zone begins. And we need to have those, the signs are more important in terms of dictating the exact confines of the zone, just like the speed limit changes right when you pass the speed limit sign. And so if someone argues, for example, that the location in the resolution is inconsistent, I want to have that word approximately in reference to the actual signs that are in place. So those are the changes I would recommend.
We're okay with that?
Yes. I just wanted to ask a question, because I looked at the, for Ward 3, and the safety zone starts, it's hard to tell, so many feet after an intersection and ends so many feet before, I think it's Malley Drive. Is there some particular reason why it doesn't go all the way to the intersections?
Thank you. So if you think about it, when it goes to an intersection, it's usually a four-way intersection. So you have to sign 3 legs of that intersection. So if you pull it up 200 feet, then you could put the advanced warning sign up, and then the actual zone can begin on that length. Otherwise, we're going to have to do multiple signs at multiple locations with arrows designating which direction and which way that the safety-sensitive zone begins.
I knew there was a good answer.
Yeah. Fox Run Parkway will be, specific. We'll need to do those signs on those side streets designating that, but in some of the others, we, try to get those pulled in a little bit from the intersection.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Please open the vote.
So, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry if I missed it. Are the amendments being accepted as a friendly amendment, or
I think so.
is that what you recommended? Or?
Yeah. So do we need to change the motion?
No, just the person who made the motion and the seconder agreed to that, and we're good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, the vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 49 as amended passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. CR 51. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A resolution approving amendment number 1 to the construction manager contract between the City of North Glen and FCI Constructors Incorporated for Phase 2 of the North Glen Civic Center project.
Move for approval?
Second.
All right, Eric Enzi, our senior planner, is here to provide a summary.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. For those of you who do not know who I am Eric Enzi. I am a planner here in the planning department, and I'm one of the staff project managers on the City Hall project, which includes both the design and the construction of the new facility. This is a pretty important milestone here this evening. Not that we haven't been doing anything on this project, as you know, up to this point, but this is kind of the first step in beginning the construction process. This item is the first of two separate contract amendments with FCI constructors on tonight's agenda. And for those of you who are newer to council, the city did bring on FCI constructors in 2022 as the general contractor for construction of the new city hall. As a means of some background, this process is being done under what's called a CMGC project delivery method, which is construction manager, general contractor delivery method. And the city brought on the general contractor early in the process in order to help with cost associated with design. So in other words, they would be there at all the meetings where we had with the design team and bring back feedback as to items, that might have budget implications. The first item this evening on your agenda, CR 51, is amendment number 1 to FCI's contract, which establishes the initial guaranteed maximum price, or IGMP, for construction of the new city hall. As part of FCI's contract, an IGMP is required to be established following the design development process of the design. The design team, which is Anderson Masondale Architects, completed the DD plan set in January, had that presentation with you all here. And after that, FCI sent those plans out for pricing with their subs. The pricing exercise has led us to the IGMP being presented to you this evening. The purpose of the IGMP is to establish a contractual construction cost baseline for the project. This is the first step in pricing efforts in the CMGC project delivery method. There are two other related terms that I will further explain the meaning of that have been talked about in your staff reports as well that relate directly to the IGMP. One is an FGMP, or a final guaranteed maximum price, and the other is a PGMP, which is a partial guaranteed maximum price. So a final guaranteed maximum price, or FGMP, is ultimately the final cost of the project, barring, of course, any change orders that might happen during construction. The FGMP results in the release of funds for the procurement of construction materials and the authorization of construction. Contractually, the FGMP must come under the IGMP value that's being considered this evening. For this project, the FGMP is being prepared into what we anticipate to be 3 separate PGMPs, or partial guaranteed maximum prices. So each one of those are a contract amendment that council will be approving to FCI's contract. And those 3 PGMPs ultimately become the final guaranteed maximum price in their totality. So for this agenda item, you are being presented at this point here with Council Resolution 51, the IGMP for construction costs associated with the new city hall. That's being presented this evening at $26,494,561. The original budget estimate for construction costs was established at $26.6 million. As a result, the IGMP is within the budget costs contemplated during the original budgeting process for this project. One other thing to note, the IGMP does have built-in cost escalation and design and construction contingencies to cover any pricing issues that may come up as we go out and bring forward those PGMPs. So just know that that's been considered in the IGMP numbers that are being presented to you this evening. And if you don't mind, I know there are a number of new faces on the council here. I'd like to just introduce some of the project team that's here this evening, just so that you kind of know what their role is in the project and maybe who they are, who their faces are. First, I'd like to introduce Cumming Management Group. Jack Christensen, right here, is basically kind of an extension of city staff. So he's on our project administration side of things, helps with procurement, as well as going over budget, there for basically all the meetings that we have with all the design teams. So and him and Nate Richards, who isn't here this evening. In terms of FCI, we've got Steve Rademacher, Nathaniel Speary, and Dan Proud here this evening, so you'll be seeing a lot of them in the coming 18 months or so of the construction project. And last but not least, Dale Anderson Mason Dale Architects is our design team. They aren't here this evening, but you will see them in the next coming months. I think they're planning on coming back for another couple discussions with council on some AV equipment in council chambers itself. So anyways, I just wanted to present those people here this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. The design team, or the team is here to answer any questions as well.
Councilmember Condon?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, two questions. My first question is, when I do the contingency of about 2.5 million over 31.3, that comes out to about 8%. Do you feel like that is a sufficient margin to account for inflation of raw materials, so on and so forth?
Yeah, and you're talking in the actual IGMP itself, because we do have additional owner's contingency that's above and beyond even the contingencies in the FGMP. But we are confident at this point by the next item that's coming forward on your agenda, that we do have sufficient contingencies, because we would be ultimately approving almost 50% of the budget of the building as part of the next item anyways. So we do feel there's sufficient contingencies in there.
Okay. And then can I invite your attention to page 31, I guess, in CR 51. And it's the, you have, I'm looking at this correctly here, third main bullet, third sub-bullet. I'm counting my bullets correctly. Am I doing that correctly? From the bottom, third main bullet, third sub-bullet, where it says contractor contingency, and I'll just read this for your convenience. These may include but not be limited to costs attributable to errors and omissions by the construction manager, semicolon, costs to correct non-conforming, damaged, or defective work. And so that, to me, is basically, if there's defective work, that will, the remediation of that will be covered by the contingency fund? Is that how I'm supposed to read that?
You want to step in and answer that question for us?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Jack Christensen with Cumming Management Group. Anything that's non-conforming work, as far as the contracts in place, is work that needs to be corrected by the contractor as part of their base scope of services. So we wouldn't see that contingency would be used to fix something that wasn't installed correctly in the first place.
Okay, gotcha. Because when I see it there listed, three separate contingencies, it kind of infers that the contingency fund is for that purpose. Maybe I'm not reading it correctly. And you're assuring me that that is indeed the case?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Long?
I've got some questions, clarifications. May I ask, is this gentleman, Cummings Management Group, is that the project manager, for lack of better words? Is that the owner's rep?
Yes.
Okay.
Cumming is the city's owner's
Okay.
rep, that's correct.
And the role that they have as opposed to the construction manager role, that's in the construction company itself?
The general contractor will be providing the role of CMAR.
CM.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and you have a little, if you wouldn't mind, just a quick overview of the relationship that those two people have, those groups have.
Sure. Real quickly, Cumming Management Group is hired by the city to be the city's representative, basically with all procurement, budgeting, sitting in on meetings, site inspections, all of that. So they're basically an extension of staff on this project. They deal a lot with contract management in terms of when we get invoices in and we get change orders, they review those on behalf of the city. So the difference between them and the general contractor, they are also obviously authorized under contract with the city. But they are working in a manner of general contractor for this particular project. So they will be doing the construction management in the field for this particular project with Cumming, myself, the project team internally to staff, working with them directly.
The subcontractors will be selected by the construction team?
That's correct.
Okay. The engineers are a part of the architects team?
That's
Is that
correct. That's correct. Yep. Structural engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, all those are under the design team
Will the
contract.
subcontractors be bringing their own materials to the site, or do we have an oversight in terms of the selection of the materials, negotiating for the best price?
I don't think I know the answer to that.
The materials that will be used for the project are procured by the subcontractors, and we go through a thorough process with the general contractor, FCI. They solicit bids from the industry. There's a minimum of 3 subcontractor bids that's required for each scope of work. The subcontractors provide a bid that is materials, procurement, oversight, installation, warranty, et cetera. So we, as the city or representation of the city, we don't make a selection on materials. That's solely on the subcontractors that are underneath the general contractor. Does
But
that,
you are monitoring the materials that are brought to the site through the
Correct.
subcontractors' devices, whatever they
correct,
choose
yes.
to do. And you're watchful of that, you're aware of industry standards for costs for materials, things of this nature? What I'm
Correct.
getting at is, there's not going to be any markups necessarily that the subs bring to the site. See what I'm saying? Because I've seen that take place, unfortunately, sometimes.
Correct, in the subcontractors that are selected in a competitive process are bidding against each other. So the bids that are proposed by the general contractor are leveled to make sure that we have a complete, full scope of work, that all of the scope is covered, materials are included, installations included. So once that decision is, or once that recommendation is made by the general contractor, and then that subcontractor, so the next resolution that's coming up is the FGMP for the initial scope of work. Those are final bid out scopes, by the subcontractors that include all of that.
Okay.
And I would also add to the design team, which would be the architect of record as well as the engineers, are also part of that process of confirming the materials that are on site match the specifications and drawings that have been put forth for the permit process.
Okay? And the architects designing those needs, what have you.
Correct.
Okay? Thank you, that's a very satisfactory answer, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm new to this, so I still have a couple
No,
more
absolutely.
questions.
We're happy to be part of
Okay.
the education process. We do this.
Thanks. The working conditions, are they set forth here as such, or are they now called general conditions?
Those are a combination of called general conditions or general requirements. So essentially, those are costs or items that are required to build the project, but aren't necessarily a permanent fixture of the project once it's complete. So an example of that could be site fencing. That's a general requirement required for safety, keeping folks out of the job site. But at the end of the project, the site fencing goes away and the building's there. So it's a cost that's required for the project, but it's not a part of the permanent project. Does that help answer your question?
Sort of. What are the percentages on your contingencies? Have you got a percentage number that you've put on those contingencies? I know Councilman asked a very good question about those contingencies, but you have a percentage that,
I don't have the percentage off the top of my head, but there are multiple different types of contingencies that we've worked through with the project team. I think you heard one of those is escalation. I think everybody's, aware of, especially even if you go to Home Depot to buy something for your house, is more today than it was, a year ago. So we've got escalation allowance that's been included as part of the general contractor's budget. They've got a construction contingency allowance that's also part of their contract. And then on the owner's side of things, we've got the owner contingency, which I think was discussed a little bit earlier. I think 8% was the value that was mentioned.
What'd you say, 8%? 8%.
And so that's outside of the general contractor's contract, so that's on the owner's side of the budget. So we've reviewed this, the process and the contingencies that are being carried are very similar to exactly what was put in place for the rec center project that was completed a couple years ago. And these aren't just arbitrary numbers that are thrown on paper, but strategies and numbers and percentages that are discussed with the team based on where we're seeing commodity pricing and escalation, so that we feel that we don't want to have too much contingency in the project, but we don't want to be standing here before you 6 months from now saying we don't have the budget to accomplish what it is that we need to accomplish.
Sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes each party has a contingency ascribed to them. And so you sit down and look at each other and say, okay, is this on you? Is it on me? Is it on the architect? I don't suppose the architect has a contingency in this, do they, or do they?
No, that's a great point. The architect does not carry contingency in their contract. So anything from a design standpoint or an additional service that would need to be covered for the contract with the architect would be part of the owner's construction or the owner's contingency.
So if there's a problem with the engineering under the architect's contract, that's on us.
That's a little bit of a slippery statement there. I think if it's something, kind of going back to what we talked about with the general contractor, if it's something that we found that, and now we're getting a little bit into the weeds, but if it's something
That's
that was
okay, yeah.
errors and omissions by a design member or a engineering firm, we would want to execute and be able to execute the contract terms and conditions that allow us to pursue that with that design entity, because it's really not the city or the owner that should be paying for a deficiency or something that's gone wrong with the design. So that's part of, as you were discussing or asking questions on what the different roles between an owner's rep and the construction manager, that's part of our role is any of those changes as we're reviewing and validating against the contract, what's the responsibility of each firm versus maybe something that's the responsibility of the city.
So you've got MEP engineers, so we got a structural engineer on this game too?
Correct.
Civil engineer?
Correct.
All they both, huh? Last question. Is there a retainage percentage that we're gonna retain?
Correct, yeah, the state value for that is 5%.
5%. And
So
we're
that's-
holding to that? That's what we'll have too?
Correct, and then there's the ability to, once project completion reaches a certain percentage complete, we have the ability to evaluate that relative to the scopes that have been completed. And so an example of that could be early foundation work could be done in a matter of 3 or 4 months. And if 6 months goes by, the project's still under construction, but their work's been complete, we can evaluate as a team, so long as everything's been signed off by the engineers, by the building authority, by the fire department, and everything's good to go, we can discuss a retention release for specific scopes of work. But
Instead of
we'll hold that throughout the project until
Instead of
we're
waiting till the whole thing is done, you might find an inability to show good faith, I would think.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time and answering my questions.
Absolutely, and we're looking forward to, the process of construction, and hopefully have a chance to see some of you out on the construction site for some progress visits as well, and happy to do so and give some tours, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Condo, did you have another question?
Yes, I did, ma'am.
Okay.
So, actually, the previous gentleman, if he can. Come on. It's not like I'm giving you a proctology exam or anything. I just noticed during the pandemic, I do do-it-yourself sort of repairs in the home. And over the course of the pandemic, of course, the price of lumber went up through the roof, I think $20. But also the quality of the lumber really suffered. At least it did at Lowe's, where, you're getting now 2x4s with more knots and stuff there. So it was interesting that you mentioned that you answered a Councilmember Long's question, that the material that the subcontractors will be bringing in will be inspected, I guess, for conformity to the spec.
Correct.
by the engineers and the architects, if I remember.
Correct, and we also have oh, sorry, please go ahead.
Is there a quality control or quality assurance element to that inspection as well, to make sure those are good materials and not 2x4s with a bunch of knots in it?
Yes,
that might cause
absolutely.
problems down the
Fortunately,
road?
in commercial construction, we don't have a lot of nominal lumber that is part of the construction, just due to codes. But to help answer your question, we do have a third-party materials testing firm that will be on the contract as well. So they'll come out and they'll be checking concrete, soil compaction, steel, welds, all of those elements. I think to your point of making sure that, not only is the material meeting the standards that's called out in the design documents, but also the installation is correct. I mean, we might have the right soil, but if it's not compacted to the correct density, so they'll be checking all of those things, concrete strength, pavement, asphalt, all of those elements. And so we track that on a weekly basis. We review it with the contractor at the regular meetings on site. And if there's any deficiencies, we're making sure those are followed up on and taken care of in a timely manner, because sometimes you can't fix things that have been incorrect for a few months, especially if they get covered up. So that's a regular log that's reviewed at the meetings on a weekly basis.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a former nuclear submarine officer, I appreciate building quality in, because, you can't fix it afterwards, so,
Absolutely. Thank you for your service, sir.
thank you.
Thank you.
I want to step away too quick.
I think that was it. Thank you. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 51 passes unanimously.
Moving into CR 52, Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A resolution approving amendment number 2 to the construction manager contract between the City of North Glen and FCI Constructors Incorporated for Phase 2 of the North Glen Civic Center project.
Move for approval.
Second.
All right. Eric, take it away.
All right, CR 52 would approve that second amendment to the city's contract with FCI Constructors. The resolution would accept a partial guaranteed maximum price 1 for construction of the new City Hall facility. With the previous item on the agenda, City Council approved the IGMP for $26,494,561. Following this, the CMGC contract requires subsequent contract amendments releasing funds for the procurement of construction materials and the authorization of certain work under what is called a PGMP, or partial guaranteed maximum price. The total of all those PGMPs establish the final guaranteed maximum price, which contractually must be within that original IGMP you approved. For purposes of this project, we are anticipating 3 of these. This will be the first one. The reason that we're breaking these up are for breaking up these pricing efforts are to ensure that the new building can be constructed according to the contract schedule that's being proposed and within the budget that has been brought forward to you this evening. The first PGMP being presented this evening would release funding for the procurement of certain items that require more long lead times for us to be able to acquire. Those items include HVAC equipment, structural timbers, the elevator, fire suppression system, plumbing equipment, electrical gear, and the relocation of existing site utilities kind of in the eastern parking lot area that are already there. PGMP number 1 would release $12,040,618 for procurement of those items. We anticipate bringing forward PGMP number 2 in May. That would be for site, foundation, and utility work. And then finally, PGMP 3 in June for the actual rest of the building, the vertical building itself. So I'm here to answer any questions if you might have any. Again, we also have Jack here as well, so.
Thank you. Councilmember Condo.
Yes, Eric, so we're authorizing these funds. Certainly, if you buy an HVAC system and the price of the HVAC actually drops for some reason or another, what happens to those surplus funds? Do those go back into circulation? How does the financial treatment of? How does that work?
Good evening again, Jack Christensen with Cumming Management Group. Great question. You know, I think it's the 8-ball crystal ball thing, right? You're always wanting to try to purchase something at the best possible price. The challenge that we run into is there's different scopes of work that have to be bought out at different times, and if we waited until the lowest possible price of each individual component of work, it would probably take us 10 years to do this. So part of the process that we're going through, the IGMP that we just talked about, that's the top set value that the cost of the project will be for the city. These individual, what I would call building blocks, or the PGMPs, as Eric explained, are we want to lock in the pricing and the scope at that point in time for that known scope of work. And so once that's completed, it's not going to be anything more than that. And then the summation of PGMP 1, 2, and 3 has to be under that top set IGMP. So we've got the sort of ceiling that's set, and then everything has to come in underneath that. And we've built contract terms and conditions such that the team has to work together as a whole to make sure that if for some reason we are getting some higher pricing on certain scopes, is that we've got to work together to get that to where it's within the IGMP. So we've essentially set the top set of it's not going to cost any more than this, and the individual components are just building blocks that get us to that. It's kind of a portion of design. The design team can't design everything from foundations all the way through carpet colors and paint colors all at the same time. So it's designed in a manner that provides the progression of the construction. So what we're talking about tonight in this PGMP 1 is, again, as you've probably heard, some of the lead times with equipment and materials nowadays is in some cases over a year just to get equipment. So we're trying to bite those pieces off, secure the cost of it, make sure that we get the materials here on time to install. And so that's what this first PGMP is really trying to get us locked in for. Does that?
And I think the answer to your question is we're locked in at the price. So generally speaking, we're not going to be getting a credit if the cost goes down. We're locked into the price that we purchase it at this point.
Okay, understand. One other follow-up, if you don't mind. And actually, I just blanked on it, so maybe you can come
Okay.
back to me after.
Councilmember Long.
Councilmember Long.
Jack, as the project manager, I'm looking to you as the best estimator we've got in this project. You guys are known for that. Estimation is what you do. So I really appreciate your saying and making statements you have to Councilman Kondo. Are we giving enough notice to notoriously late folks like Xcel Energy in our projects and all like
No,
this?
that's a great question. We actually started with Excel months ago. We've actually developed what I would call a pretty decent working relationship with them. I know there's contracts in place with the city already with Excel, and so we've been leveraging those relationships and contracts already. We don't even have the final 100% complete design done yet for the electrical system, but we already have those lines of communication. And but it's a great point you bring up, because much like some of the equipment, just dealing with the jurisdictions and utility providers is also another challenge. So we're aware of that, and fortunately worked well with them in phase 1, which is the rec center, and successfully completed that. So we're leveraging those relationships and working on that for City Hall right now.
Can you tell me again the total contract construction time that we're looking at? Months?
What do we got?
It's 18 months, yeah. Total 18 months.
18 months.
Correct.
And there'll still be, there's a little overlap there. So I think, as Eric mentioned, we have PGMP 1 tonight, 2 will be part of the site work and foundation package, 3 will be the completion of the design, including finishes. But essentially what we're doing is, once we release and approve PGMP 1, it allows certain elements to be started. Because if we waited until the design was complete, this might be a 24-month, 26, 30-month schedule. So we're really trying to kind of overlap and be as efficient as we can with the design and construction schedule for the entire project.
Uniquely, the city provides the permits. Is this correct?
It's through Safe Built, correct?
Yeah, so are we having an overlap of permits maybe, so we can get a jump on some
We
of the
do,
other
and
pieces?
we've been working very well with Safe Built as well as the fire department, previous phase with the rec center project. They've been involved in some of the early design meetings because we want to make sure that we're not going down a path that, for some reason, they might see as a conflict to the current code. But we have discussed and coordinated with them on phase permits where we can get a permit that allows us to start work on the site work as well as foundations, so we're not waiting for one single permit.
That makes tremendous good sense. Thank you. Last question. Have we had learned counsel involved in all of these contracts?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We've been working very closely for quite some time on contracts and feel very comfortable.
I assume that. I just wanted verification. Thank you.
Councilmember Condo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question that I just had a senior moment on. So the PGMP, you said clearly it's informed by long lead item components. Is it also informed by critical path items in the timeline as well, so that you're not kind of
Correct,
being delayed?
and the majority of the critical path items in this PGMP 1 have to deal with procurement items. So as we've been working with FCI, the general contractor, they're constantly monitoring with the market what the lead time is of equipment. And so once we do that critical path method schedule, we understand what's driving the schedule. And so those are the elements that we put into this PGMP 1 package to make sure that we're not pushing the schedule out just due to getting materials here on site timely.
And then I noticed in the reading material, the timeline schedule, it says preliminary. Is there a timeline for eventually nailing that down, or will it always be a living document?
No, well, the schedule is always a living document because it's constantly changing, but with each PGMP, there'll be a schedule for that specific portion of work. Right now, we're dealing primarily with procurement of materials, so there's only a portion of that that's locked in, knowing that it's, 52 weeks to get, this piece of material on site. With PGMP 2 and 3, we'll have a schedule. Obviously, with 3, which is the final piece, that will be the final schedule that's locked in. But we're similar to the materials testing. That's something that we review on a weekly basis with the contractor during our meetings on site and site walks. So, but it is a little bit of a living and breathing document. But the PGMP that ultimately, or the FGMP that's signed, locks that in as a contract final schedule. So much like the IGMP that sets kind of the top set of, here's the top price that we'll pay for the project, we'll have a schedule that says this is the schedule for the project. We also have weather days built into that as well, so we know, obviously, living in Colorado, that there'll be some days that affect the critical path of the work, so we've accounted for those days in the schedule. So again, we'll be monitoring that on a weekly basis with the contractor.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Thank you. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 52 passes unanimously.
Resolution CR 56. Joanna, will you read the title, please?
A resolution appointing a regular member to the North Glen Victim Assistance and Law Enforcement Bail Board.
Move for approval. Second.
Way to go. Okay. There is no formal staff summary. This Mayor Pro Tem Lukman Hiramasa applied to serve on the Bail Board, was interviewed by the board, and they recommended her appointment. Pursuant to the municipal code, vacancies are filled by the mayor, subject to approval of city council. So I am also recommending. The Bail Board consists of 5 regular members, 1 alternate, and 1 staff ex officio member. No more than 2 members can be members of city council. Mayor Pro Tem Lukman Hiramasa will be the only member of council on the Bail Board, and they have 2 vacancies remaining, 1 for a regular member and 1 for an alternate member. Is there any discussion? No? Slam dunk. I think you're going to be a
Thank
great
you.
asset to that, so thank you for serving in that way. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
I will close that vote, and CR 56 passes unanimously.
Three discussion items tonight. The first one is the 2022 pavement condition assessment. Kent Kisselman, our Director of Public Works, will present this item to council. Hi, Kent.
Good evening, thanks for having me. All right, so the purpose is just to give you an update on our PCI. That's our pavement condition index, which is the rating of all of our roadways in the city of North Glen. Background, there was a resolution that wants us to maintain our PCI at 70. We've never been at a 70. The methodology is ASTM, that's a Army Corps of Engineers standard. We conduct the PCI every 3 years. We started with IMS, who does the PCI with the LiDAR technology. You've seen those photos before, and they've been doing it since 2016. In 2019, our rating was 60. I'm going to say that's 62, not 60. Maybe in 2016, it was 60. So that's an error on my part. And our next one is scheduled for 3 years from last year. So our results, the backlog is the percentage of streets with a PCI of 40 or less, and that is a rating of poor. And so you can see from our kind of evolution, our backlog was 17 and then 7, and in 2022 it's 8. So for the last 3 years, we've been under that backlog. The percent of excellent, under 15% indicates that we were, kind of underfunding the roadway network, and you can see again that number in 16 was an increase of that. And then generally a healthy agency, we have less than 10% of backlog, and that is currently what we have right now. This is the ratings. It rates from 100 down to 0. You can see the different categories. This is a good graph here, and you can see where the gray line, kind of the swoopy line there is the general, what you want a healthy system to look like. And you'll see over the last, 2016 is red, 2019 blue, and 2022 green. You can see how much progress we made by your investments over the last 3 years. Where over in excellent, we have the largest bar, which if you think about the progression and how the degradation works, those streets will degrade over the next three years and 6 years, filling in the graph where the hole is at the top of the bell there. And so our system is healthy, but on the same hand, you can see where we have 50 marginal and poor, where they're above the bell. And so those are the streets that we want to continue to identify to maintain. And if anybody has any questions along the way, we can do it now or later. We run our page, so IMS actually does the physical tracking of the system. They come out and they do the roadway. They drive every single road. On 4-lane roads, they make 2 passes. On a typical residential street, they'll make 1 pass. And then you'll see in the overall packet, what those degradations and things are and the various failures of the asphalt. The program we use in-house is StreetLogix, and we've had that now for about 4 years, and that is just an amazing program where we can take the IMS data, send it to StreetLogix, and it gets inputted in there, and then it spits out, what we need to spend, how we can alter the streets, it updates it, and, I think for the last 2 or 3 years, the StreetLogix has been available on our website, and residents are able to go on there, click on a section, and you can physically see when improvements were made on your section. And again, I will mention section, you can't go on there and say, well, what was Irma? Or it goes by block, so you'll have to click on each little individual segment, and how we kind of come up with our rating to determine what street we're gonna pave. We take all those little segments and kind of average them together, and then we say, okay, well, the average was like 47, we should probably do that. We did this prior, so these are all the streets that are rated fair or less, so a 50 or below. These are all the yellow streets, so these would be those last two bar graphs in that previous slide. And then this is where, again, you can see our software there and our storyboard. And this is for information. And I'll answer any questions.
Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you can go back to the slide on page 56, the bell curve one. More. So just curious as to, when you look at the cluster there of the third bar graph from the left, and it seems like you got a pretty substantial sort of, when you're looking at the red bars, kind of like this hump or distribution curve that peaks out there. And I'm just curious, when you do your analysis, do you also think about, when you're establishing your prioritization, whether you just say, yeah, you know, streets that fit in this category, we're gonna prioritize arterial streets first as opposed to feeders, collectors, et cetera? What, can you just kind of explain that algorithm, how you think about that?
Just clarification. So the red lines were from 2016.
Oh, it is, okay. I'm
So
sorry.
that was 6 years ago. So
Okay.
the green lines on this graph are where our system is at as of last year of 2022, when we did the new index.
Okay,
The old ones, the red and the blue, are showing
historical.
historical
Okay,
data.
gotcha,
So,
gotcha.
again, just showing that bell curve and how healthy now our system is. And again, you know, that far right bar, as the degradation occurs over the next 3 years, will fill in the bell curve, and it'll, you know, again, if we continue our investments,
Okay.
then it'll look just like it should.
So if you could advance 2 slides forward, as you think about setting priorities, do you typically go after the arterial streets first? How do you,
Historically, we've done it in 2 segments. So we have the residential street program, and then the arterials are kind of separate. So specifically in 2023, this year, we have $950,000 budgeted for only residential streets. And we really want to continue that only for residential streets because arterial roadway sections take up so much of the money. And so we're spending a different amount of money, which you approved, the $650,000 for a portion to pave 112th. So that would be our arterial section for this year. And then not included in 2023, in addition to these streets, would be, you know, the 112th improvements, the Huron improvements under ARPA funding. You know, so those larger segments, you know, Community Center Drive that you approved last year, the finishing of Leroy, you know, so all those sections of pavement were either already in other CIP projects or have been already approved. And so, you know, when we go to put the street logics together, we take the totality of all of those things, and then that's how we enter it into the system, into street logics, and it spits out those numbers.
got it, thank you.
Councilmember Goff?
Mine's probably, hopefully easily answered. But you, on that one page where you talked about the street logic, where you could log in or click on it and see, it's asking for passwords and things like that.
I'll check that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Councilmember Long?
Yes. I tend to be a more visual person looking at maps as opposed to bar graphs. So I've looked with great interest on by the way, this is excellent work, it's tremendous. Pages 76 through 79 drew my attention. And I'm thinking more so probably page 79, which is your 5-year rehab.
You're not on the PowerPoint, right? You're into the.
And-
I'm into
Yeah.
this handout. I'm so sorry if you don't have it on the.
Okay, I'm trying to find
Here it
page
is.
79.
Do you have it, or?
Is it 79 listed
There's
as?
like 4 pages you've done, and
Okay.
map.
76 to 79. I won't bore everybody with the 4 pages, but if you look to 79, that one kind of did it for me in terms of how you're seeing the
Five-year
future.
rehab,
Yeah,
PCI, $1.5 million annual budget.
yeah. You
Yes,
mind
sir.
just having a little discussion and describe how you came to this one or what you think about it?
In 2022, when we first did the PCI, we had this entire conversation, and it was, in a study session as well, and our PCI was in desperate help. It was at 62. And so you, as council, decided to make a significant investment and invest the funds to raise the PCI. And so over $15 million, maybe even more, has been invested over the last 3 years to raise that PCI from 67, or from 62 to 67. And so, back in 2022, when we put this all together, it was, that's what it would have taken to maintain the system at a 62, but you went above and beyond. And so now at our strategic planning session, we need to come up with those numbers and what do those figures look like to maintain the system at a 67 as we move forward. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah, it does. The scholarship that you've put into this, again, is stellar. And I'm sorry, I'm getting caught up now. I didn't realize the 15 million. I can only guess that this is a very difficult job that you have. I'm assuming that you get lots of calls from lots of folks, so I applaud you for having this kind of sophistication as way of a response. And I can stand on behalf of my ward and my constituents and say, look, we've got a really great group of people that are attacking and looking at this. Don't think for 1 minute they haven't considered what you're looking at. So I want to thank you for that.
No, I certainly appreciate that. Thank you. And last year, I believe and again, in 2022, we built a 5-year plan, and we completed that 5-year plan in 3 years. And again, those didn't even include the streets that I mentioned earlier, the 120th, the Huron, the 112th. So in 2023, if we were to input data into StreetLogix, it would spit out a new PCI, and we would probably see that number raise to a 68 potentially, just, thinking about all the roadway network we have. So again, the investment for 2023 is a significant one with all the other CIP projects.
So to add on to that, I think the IMS report is amazing. I really appreciate the photos and the definitions of what types of road damage it assesses. I think that's really clear, not only for us, but for residents. And you mentioned our website, and I think that's great. Is there kind of I haven't been there to poke around, but is there sort of an abridged version of this report there, or can they click on the whole report?
We haven't published this report yet, but we can certainly make it available online.
Okay, I just wasn't sure.
And we could
then-
do something like have them write us up an executive summary or something, and maybe some of the photos or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. So a couple things. Can residents still use this, is it CRM, the Access North Bend, for potholes and real quick patching
Yes.
things? Okay. And I have to say, I've been studying these maps, and I really can't tell which map is which. And so one map shows Huron south of 104th, pretty significant red and orange. But I don't know if that's my question is, I drove by there today, and the amount of patching, is that whole street gonna get redone south of 104th?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure. It wasn't on the potential streets, but I'm guessing it's just because
No,
it's
again,
already on the
that's
list.
part of the Huron project, which was sponsored by
Right.
ARPA funds, so that's another
Okay.
CIP project.
Oh, fantastic, because I just kept looking, little
Yeah.
patches. like,
Again, and I can cover that again. So 120th will get all repaved. Huron, south of 104th, all repaved.
Okay,
112th from Huron to Federal, and I know we don't go all the way to Federal, but that's going to be all repaved. That's our partner project with Westminster this year.
okay. I thought I heard mention of traffic calming painting on Fox Run Parkway. Is that gonna happen like after you pave it, or do you put it on and then you have to redo it after it?
I don't believe Fox Run Parkway, I don't believe that's one of the sections we'd be paving this year.
It's not. I just
Okay.
wasn't sure the timing of the
No, and I
lines.
failed to mention this last year, and maybe we can get a little cheer, but we did receive concurrence from CDOT, and so we're finalizing that Connect North Glen grant that we received over 2 years ago, it feels like now, to go out to bid, and then we'll be expediting that contract to get in front of you so we can do that striping.
Okay. Well, I guess I wasn't sure. I mean, eventually it'll need to be repaved just with natural wear and tear. And I didn't know if you timed the striping and the paving so that you don't have to do it twice.
No, and we did that on Melody several years ago. You know, we went ahead and repaved all of Melody and then put down the nice striping. So, yeah, we would be thoughtful in that when we, you know, even Irma a couple years ago, when we paved Irma, then we put the striping on it. So, yeah, we look for that.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you. Councilmember Condo?
Yes, Madam Mayor, may I ask a question? Just an update from Ken on 120th?
Sure.
It's okay. So I noticed westbound on 120th, just after you pass the end-line bridge, it looks like they've necked down to one lane again. Any update on that as to how long that's going to be there, just for information only?
No, great question.
Update.
I can get an update and send it to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it is slowing down traffic significantly during the daytime, so, thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Kent. This was
Thank you.
great. All right, the next discussion item, Rocky Flats Stewardship Council 101. Shelley Stanley, Water Quality Coordinator, is here to provide this item. Hello. Oh, I like it.
Good evening, council. Thank you for inviting me to speak about Rocky Flats. Get my- Did I do that wrong?
There it is.
Oops. Rocky Flats issues are followed via the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council. There are 10 governmental entities on the council and 4 citizen seats. Councilman Condo is our representative on the board. We'll go over a brief history of the production years, closure, and the implications for the water bodies of concern, and then we'll close with current issues. So let's get oriented. In the slide on the bottom right is Stanley Lake. The largest road is Indiana. It may be easier to refer to the 1996 aerial that we have here. In the center of the site is the Central Operable Unit. That is DOE, or Department of Energy, Legacy Management retained lands. This is the area that is the primary concern for the Stewardship Council. That land is surrounded by the Peripheral Operable Unit, which is now the Rocky Flats Wildlife Refuge. No citizens are allowed on the Central Operable Unit. However, citizens are allowed on the refuge. Oops. Get this right, maybe. The site was closed under federal regulations, but the water quality standards are governed by the state of Colorado. So for this reason, there are both the EPA and CDPH&E are the regulatory agencies. Rocky Flats was part of the defense program during the Cold War. The men and women that worked on the site were not military, but they served their nation nonetheless. Plutonium triggers and shielding machinery were manufactured on site. Between the 1950s to the 1980s, there were multiple environmental releases. Trigger production began in 1953, and in 1957, there was a fire. 1958 to 1969, contaminated soil from the 903 pad was spread by the wind. The 903 pad, I'm certain you've seen the photographs of the 55-gallon drums that were stored outside. They corroded. The contents of the drums leached into the soil and into the groundwater. So that was heavy metals, uranium, and volatile organic compounds. 1969, a second fire occurred in the plutonium production buildings. 70s through 73, there were releases of detention pond sediments into Walnut Creek that contaminated Great Western Reservoir, which at the time was a drinking water source for the city of Broomfield. Tritium releases occurred. Production water from the solar ponds exceeded the solar pond capacities, and so it was sprayed. Just many, many different environmental spills occurred. 1989, the EPA raided the site. 1991, Soviet Union was dissolved. In 1992, the weapons production halted on site. That began the 10-year cleanup process. Now, the site was closed under an accelerated agreement, which is to say that not all infrastructure was removed. There's quite a bit of infrastructure that remains in place, or it was remediated in place. That said, there was extensive water, soil, and air monitoring conducted prior to the 2006 corrective action decision, record of decision, which closed the site. The photograph on the left is the pit that was produced on site. That was produced in the high security zone. There's one entrance to that zone and one exit to that zone, surrounded by armed men, women in towers that surrounded that site. On the south side was the shielding manufacturing area and administrative functions. I'd like to point out the 903 pad, which is on the bottom left. And then the solar ponds are sort of at the tip of the arrow. This is what the site looks like a couple years after closure. Kind of belies what happened out there. It looks very, very different than it did. The 800-plus buildings were decommissioned. Tons and tons of waste was shipped off-site. The creek in the photograph is Woman Creek, which is what staff follows for the city. So what do we mean by accelerated closure? These are all buildings, slabs, and tunnels that remain out there. They were not removed. Infrastructure below or deeper than 3 feet was left in place. These are your water and wastewater lines. It's very potential conduit for moving contaminants that remain out there. Now, foam was used to plug some of these pipes, but both the pipes and the foam deteriorate over time. These are some of the stormwater culverts and pipes. There are 3 groundwater treatment systems out there. The solar ponds and the mound sites are active. Their energy is supplied via solar panels. And then the present landfill is a passive. There is extensive groundwater and surface water sampling out there. There's 80-plus groundwater wells, 12 surface water monitoring sites, in addition to those 3 treatment sites. There are 2 points of compliance, one on Walnut Creek, one on Woman Creek. Extensive monitoring continues out there. And then in addition to the water quality monitoring, there is ecological monitoring that goes on out there as well. So what is the condition of the vegetation? Is soil being exposed? Is the Preble Meadow jumping mouse, which is an endangered species, how's that habitat? How does it, what's the condition of it? Is the elk herd exceeding the land holding capacity? What's the presence or absence of prairie dogs? So even though the site's been closed for over a decade, there's still quite a bit going on. These are the types of activities being followed by the Stewardship Council. Rocky Flats has a very long and complicated history. And there remains a lot of unknowns, particularly climate change. And how is that going to affect the remedies on site? There's lots of data to be digested and information to be assimilated, and passions on both sides remain high. So Rocky Flats may be closed, but its legacy lives on. It will be with us for a long time. So it's important to understand the site's history and to keep apprised of current conditions. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Councilmember Kondo.
First of all, thank you very much, Shelley, for a really great presentation. And even though you've mentioned that I'm on the Stewardship Council, I think I've only been on board less than a month, so I'm going to ask you a few questions. I hope you don't mind.
Oh, no.
As
Please do.
I figure I need to get smart. My first question is, when you talk about sampling, is the element of concern mainly plutonium, or are there other radionuclides that are of grave concern, especially if they enter the water, our water system, Stanley Lake?
There's 2 parts to your questions. The constituents that are monitored out there are plutonium, americium, uranium, heavy metals, and we also look at volatile organic compounds. And then there's a new contaminant of concern, PFAS, or forever chemicals, are also there. I want to make it very, very clear that none of that runoff from Rocky Flats enters Stanley Lake as of 1995. So it's been severed, physically severed for decades. Here, I'm going to point it out.
Thank you.
Woman Creek Reservoir.
Yeah,
Can you see all right?
I couldn't. Your finger was right there.
All right, so
Okay.
that's Woman Creek Reservoir. It physically separates Woman Creek from Stanley Lake.
Okay.
So prior to that, yes, there was runoff occurred from the site that was usually gotten into Stanley Lake. There's been lots of sampling within the lake as well as the sediments in the past. We currently do sample the lake for it's protected, sir.
Okay,
I want to make that very, very clear.
gotcha. Another question, if you'll indulge me. So yes, when I look at the map, it looks like there's about 4 buildings that were remediated and left with contamination in place. Buildings 371, 771, 774, and 790. And then in my mind's eye, I tried to juxtapose the sewage and storm drains. And you mentioned this, the material, the piping for those drains, I don't know, is there any idea if that's steel, concrete? Any idea what the lifespan is of those pipes?
I can't answer that.
Okay,
But it is mixed. I can tell you that it is mixed, probably some concrete, plastic, PVC, maybe some steel and such. As to buildings, all of those little, there's
Yep.
a lot more than just the few buildings that you mentioned. Every single one of those outlines remain in place, sir.
oh, really? But the ones with contamination are the ones with the crosshatch, right? That's kind of how I inferred that maybe it's 4 buildings?
No,
No?
I'm sorry, almost all of those have been exposed.
Okay.
All of those buildings have been exposed and remediated in place.
Okay,
The
understand.
ones that are hatched or also yellow colored, that is only part of the building is in place. The others, the entire building is in place.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for explaining that.
3 feet and below, excuse me. I didn't mean to-
Okay.
Other questions?
One last question. So I did attend the last meeting as a guest to help get my feet underneath me. There was a lot of discussion about slum movement or slum migration. I wonder if you can, does that term sound familiar to you? I don't know if it has to do with mud flow, dirt flow.
slumping?
Yeah, slumping.
Oh, yes.
Other than slumping in my chair, I don't know what slumping might be.
There. Photograph of that. All right, so let's go back to this one. Let's try to stand out of the way. So right here is the original landfill. There was slumping that occurred in this area. The slumping never made it to Walnut Creek, or Woman Creek. Maybe that was- So, yeah, that was, they have installed huge acres. The acres, I think, are 12 feet by 12 feet by 2 feet deep, 2 feet in depth. And they anchored those along this slope. I think over 40 of them were put to stabilize that slope so it no longer slides down.
Okay. And is there any contamination or radionuclides in that landfill area of that dirt?
The Department of Energy claims that this was largely non-radioactive. However, there was a fire that they dumped the materials that were on fire into the original landfill, and they were contaminated.
Okay.
So it is not. Mostly what we are concerned ourselves with on the Woman Creek side are volatile organic compounds from this, which is the 903 pad.
Okay.
The radionuclides were in the hot zone, which is here, which ran into Walnut Creek, so Lucky City and County of Broomfield, right? That's what they're mostly concerned with, is all the radionuclides and the plutonium trigger production. On our side, it's mostly VOCs.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate that explanation.
Councilmember Byrne?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation. I would love to just hear a little bit more about the future proofing and the idea of climate change, especially Stanley Lake got super low last year, and sort of what sort of testing are we doing to see if settlement comes back up, or what's the plan as the water levels are changing so drastically year to year?
So your concern is for sediment that may be currently contaminated and currently in Stanley Lake?
Yeah. That especially as it's getting lower.
Answer that.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Councilmember Burns, I'm Tamara Moon. I'm the city's environmental manager. I work with Shelley, and I understand that what you're concerned about is when we drain Stanley, or when we use Stanley Lake to an extra low level, maybe during times of drought, and then we fill it back up, does that stir up sediment?
Yeah.
So fortunately, because so much of the sediment that contains contamination from the Rocky Flat site is kind of buried beneath new layers of sediment, we don't really have a lot of concern about those sediments getting stirred up. I would say that this is one of those instances where the conversation that we've been having about motorized boats is one of those, glad we don't have motorized boats on Stanley Lake anymore, because if we did drop the water level to a significantly lower level and then had motorized boats, that would stir up those sediments. So when just the normal process of filling the lake and lowering the lake for our water consumption isn't going to cause that stirring up of sediments. So, but monitoring and making sure that we're not putting activities on the lake that does is really important.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Long?
And I thought this was going to be a boring presentation. My goodness.
I mean, everyone wants to.
This is,
Rocky, right?
yeah, man. I know some people that worked in remediation there, actually.
Fascinating site.
And I knew the physician who was in charge of everybody that had problems back in the day, sadly. You quite adamantly said that there's no way that there's any water coming out of Woman's Creek or Woman's Reservoir into the Stanley Lake. And how can you say it? Did they build a wall below grade or something?
It's a reservoir, sir. Here, I'm gonna get this closer.
Okay, thank
You are
you.
the furthest from us.
Okay,
So, this is the Woman Creek Reservoir.
Gotcha.
The water fills up.
Yeah.
There are pumps present there. The water is pumped to right in front of there. So it never gets.
oh, it never goes this way,
It
you're pumping
never
it
goes
that
this
way.
way.
Is
Pump it
is that the elevation that takes it there, is that?
Pipeline right
Okay,
here.
that's the pipe, okay, that's, so what's in that one then? What's,
This is a Great Western Reservoir. The city and county of Broomfield is currently using it for reclaimed water. So it is also separate from runoff from
okay,
the,
so the natural contours take it that way. Actually, the tunnels you built, or were
the
built.
pipeline.
The pipeline, I'm sorry, yeah, okay.
But when the tritium was released in the 70s, the city of Broomfield petitioned the Department of Energy to replace their water supply. We did. So that water supply, their Great Western Reservoir, is no longer used for drinking water for the city and county of Broomfield. It's used for reclaim, they treat their wastewater, they pump it up, and then they use it for irrigation. The Great Western is also severed from Rocky Plaza.
What's the biggest surprise you've had from the Department of Energy in the last 5 years vis-à-vis this project, this situation?
When the site was closed, the Stanley Lake cities, North Bend, Thornton, Westminster, as well as the city and county of Broomfield staff were involved with closure. And we were hoping for additional institutional controls. We were hoping that all the terminal reservoirs would be would become an institutional control and therefore become part of the remedy. So they get that label, remedy. We lost that battle. It was a blow. But on the flip side, we were able to convince the EPA representative that there are too many uncertainties on site. We hadn't gone through a drought. We hadn't gone through wildfires and such. There's settling that was going to occur, obviously. Councilmember Kondo brought up the slope instability. So we argue, downstream communities argue, that we need to have an adaptive management plan in place. No other former Superfund site in our nation has an adaptive management plan other than Rocky. And so that was a surprise plus for us. It bought us some more time to study some other environmental conditions that occur in between the closure and when they breach those terminal dams.
Thank you. Plot thickens.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you for this presentation. It's very thorough. I think our residents can have confidence that we're keeping an eye on what's going on there. We're on top of things. My question was going to be about, lower water levels and motorboats, but you've answered that. And that's something that we just really, need to stick to our guns on. I mean, the risk is just too great. So thank you very much for all the information.
Thank you for inviting me.
Mayor Pro Tem Lukman Hiramasa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for that presentation. I learned a lot. I had no idea there's a lot of these remediations already in place. So my question was, 3 feet, these structures are remediated in place 3 feet below ground, right? That doesn't seem a lot to me. Doesn't seem like a lot to me, but that's maybe just my ignorance in terms of thinking of how something so toxic is being remediated in place. Are there any plans to further, is that part of the monitoring, but to further, remove some of those structures? Is that just something that would just create too much more like airborne toxicity? I'm just trying to understand a little bit more the decision to remediate in place, or if there's anything further that can be done. One of the things I wrote down was a fire, and you just mentioned that in that last answer to the question. What if there's a wildfire? That area was very close to being evacuated during the Marshall fires. So, that amount of heat over that site, I'm just trying to understand what else can be done, or are there plans to do anything else?
The process is that once a site is closed, then no more remediation will occur on site. So, your question about going back in and removing some of the infrastructure that remains, highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. They would open themselves up to a whole new environmental assessment process and such. Now, that said, there is extensive monitoring, water quality monitoring on site. And so the thought being under this accelerated agreement, remediation agreement, was that as things change, conditions change, it would be caught by these monitoring stations. I would agree 3 feet is not, but the heat from a wildfire typically won't penetrate that deep. So I wouldn't be too concerned about at least wildfire affecting any of the infrastructure that remains. The vulnerability with a wildfire is that then you leave the soil for a certain period of time is exposed. And then it can blow or be run off in a precipitation event and move any potential pollutant that would remain. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invite once again.
Have a good night. Okay, next item, proposed modifications to the Unified Development Ordinance, UDO, Amendment Number 3. Ashley McFarland, our city planner, is here to present. Hello.
Madam Mayor, Council, hi. My name's Ashley McFarland, and I'm from the Planning Department. As you stated, we will be going over modifications to the Unified Development Ordinance. And I will slip over to my slide. All right, so the purpose this evening, as I stated, is to go over and kind of have discussion on the UDO items up for modification. We're looking for some sort of consensus on these items, hopefully by the end of the evening. Background on this discussion, topics were presented. These topics are being presented as recommendations from the Planning Commission, and the code references are in this staff memo. Attachment 1 and Amendment 3 is the changed versions of the UDO. These changes do include the revised language from the Planning Commission. All changes are highlighted in yellow. All the caps are the new language that are being proposed, and the strike-throughs are what's going to be removed. Moving into discussion. So the first item is applicability of temporary use and special events permitting. So the First Amendment adds language stating that temporary use permits will not be required for residential private parties or residential block parties. This includes the block party trailer. A definition of residential block party has been added in the definition section. For the second modification, language has been added to allow rock and gravel driveways for single-family residential zone districts only. Maintenance language was also added for things such as weeds and reducing rutting. And then delineation language was proposed to be clear on what would be a parking service and what would be landscaping. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to reach them out. The third item is regarding landscaping materials. We added language, or the language was changed for this one. Currently, single-family homes do require 50% of living material. However, we're proposing to change this language to a count-based system. The minimum count required would be based on a sliding scale and would be based on front yard square footage. We'll get to that in just a second. The regulations would only apply to single-family zone districts, and this would allow 100% rock mulch in front yards with the minimum tree, shrub, and grass requirements that we'll see on the next slide. Proposed language for ground covering maintenance was proposed, and then artificial turf regulations were also added. So the minimum single-family residential landscaping that I was referring to in the previous slide, staff has provided a proposed sliding scale based on front yard square footage. You can see it's kind of divided into 3 different front yards square footage based on the average front yards within North Glen. And then there's a various kind of amounts for trees, shrubs, and ornamental grasses, depending on how large the front yard is. So that would be the new minimum requirement there. The next item includes description of 2 types of stuccos. And these 2 types of stuccos would be approved under other masonry. The allowance of masonry and synthetic stucco would be within, my apologies. The synthetic stucco is also known as EFIS. That might be a little bit helpful there. Both of these, masonry and synthetic stucco, would be approved as exterior finish materials for single-family, all residential, and non-residential buildings. However, both stucco types would not be required to meet the 30% masonry for multifamily, mixed-use, and non-residential. We wanted to ensure that different materials were included on these non-residential units. Last item for discussion is the temporary banner requirements. Wall banners would be based on a sliding scale, and these would be based off of the structure or the unit square footage. The freestanding banners would go from 36 square feet to 40 square feet. And then the properties would be allowed up to 2 wall banner signs or 2 freestanding banner signs. However, the total square footage could not exceed the maximum area per sign face. So an example, you could have 2 freestanding banners, but both could not exceed the 40 square feet when combined. Last item for discussion, we added some administrative and procedure language for developments that did not include subdividing, but did include public improvements. So right now, the code currently states that we have an SIA, which I think some of you are familiar with. This would be subdividing the property and also public improvements. So we were just adding language under a development agreement for properties that don't have to subdivide, but do need public improvements. So next up, we are looking for discussion and hopefully consensus on these modifications. If consensus is made, then we will come to you all for first reading on April 10th and then second reading on April 24th, which would be a public hearing. And any questions?
Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, thanks for explaining this, but regarding stucco, I still am stuck, no pun intended. So I'm looking at page 122, paragraph C, where it talks about masonry and synthetic stucco systems or other masonry materials approved by the director shall be used on an area of at least 30% of the facade fronting the public right-of-way. Is this specifically to single-family homes? Because it sounds like in what you verbalized, you can't use stucco on multifamily homes to meet that 30% coverage requirement. Is that the nuance that I'm missing?
It's a little confusing, and I thank you for the question. So the 30% masonry wouldn't apply to single family. So single family can have either stucco on their home. They just would require 30% masonry. Is that correct? They would require 30% masonry. For the kind of third bullet here, this is for multifamily, mixed use, non-residential. There's another regulation in the code that requires 30% masonry, and what we're saying is not masonry for those non-residential outside of multifamily would be something like, we would like to see brick as the 30%, not the stucco
Right.
as the
Multifamily.
30%. Yes, multifamily, not single family.
Okay. And maybe it's an artifact of the packet not having every single page, so I might have missed a major section that says, oh, this is multifamily homes.
It's okay, the
This is single.
sections are a little confusing.
Okay, gotcha. I'm no longer stuck on stucco.
Councilmember Burns.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm fairly new to this, so I just have like a couple background questions, like why why couldn't people have like stucco on their house?
So we actually, stucco is now approved as a single-family masonry option. Well, we had a resident come to us and ask if stucco could be approved as an exterior finish. And so we did make a director's decision under other masonry that says stucco would be allowed. So this is just formalizing that and making it a little bit more clear with some definitions.
I guess my question was like, why wasn't it approved before?
Great question.
There's probably a lot of things that happened in the 50s. I don't know.
So part of what we were doing with when we did the UDO process back in 2017 through 2019, Brooks Svoboda, by the way, planning director, part of where North Glen, most of the housing development occurred was in the 60s and through the 70s, and then we had another surge in the late 90s, early 2000s. But most of those materials were basically wood materials, and so it was more of a carrying forward of what was already in place in the community and just carrying forward those standards. But then as people start to look and doing additions and making modifications to their homes, it was more or less trying to be more accommodative for those new requests coming in and trying to standardize it rather than always being an administrative amendment that goes through the director. So it's more or less trying to say, this is something that, if it's done reasonably well, is something that would be considered.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And then I have a question about the front yard. So I bought my house just over a year ago. It was a flip, so, you know, they didn't really put a lot of thought into the landscaping because we bought it in March. And so I'm interested as to, okay, I have a dying tree in my front yard. I'm gonna remove it. Now I have to replace it?
So right now, the UDO has landscaping requirements that are basically saying you have to have 50% living material. So if you have technically 50% of your front yard being grass, then you would be in code. It doesn't matter if that tree died or didn't. This regulation is specifically looking at if you wanted to, let's say, dig up all your grass and then, oh, that tree was dying, and this got implemented and you didn't have your one tree with your 3 shrubs, then you would have to come up to standard with this minimum standard. So you would need to replace that tree. But if your,
sorry, go ahead.
no, you're fine. But if your property already meets the minimum standards that's outlined in the existing landscaping materials that are approved, then you wouldn't need to worry about it.
So I do want to rip up my whole front yard because I'm a big proponent of xeriscape. So the 50% of living material is like kind of tricky.
Right, and that's why we're switching from a percentage-based to a count-based. So that way it's easier for residents to say, hey, I want to rip up my front yard, do some xeriscaping. What is the minimum for xeriscaping? I need to have this much and show that I have this much xeriscaping in my yard to say that something in the something is landscaped in your front yard.
Okay. Okay, so just for super clarification, because I've been sitting here for a while, I rip up my tree, I xeriscape my yard, as long as I meet the minimum living materials requirement, I don't have to replace my dead tree.
Yep, you're good.
Cool, thank you.
Councilmember Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. No question here. Just wanted to say thank you, and that one of these recommendations here came from a resident about the rock driveway. So I really appreciate you guys listening, taking that feedback in, but also ensuring that maintenance of that, no rutting, weeds is also put in there. So thank you for thinking of that. This looks great.
Councilmember Goff?
I just want to also say thank you, because the landscaping thing is something that I had concerns about. We've seen more and more people get rid of their trash. So this really spells it out.
Mayor Pro Tem Lukman Hiramasa?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, this is great. The whole rock driveway and gravel driveway, that was definitely a big thing, so it's great to see this finally fade out. I have a question. 2 trees seems like a lot, so if, you know, I'm just, like, is there a certain size to the trees, depending on the size of your yard? I'm just trying to envision, as much as I love trees, but, you know, just thinking that maybe that could be a big financial lift for somebody to, you know, have 2 trees planted. So I'm still trying to figure that out as well. You know, if I have a big beautiful tree, as Councilmember Burns was giving example. And I don't need to, it's great, it's still alive, and I want to do xeriscaping, and I have to get a second tree, or I'm still grandfathered in. That's still a little.
Let me also explain where you might see that bottom square footage more frequently. There are two subdivisions within North Glen that are larger lot subdivisions, so they're not the standard subdivision that you see in most of North Glen. One of those being off of Kennedy and Melody, kind of tucked back in that area between 112th and Kennedy. The other area is also on the west side of the city there too. So those are two of the subdivisions where you would see this come in. So it would be, they do have larger front yards, which could accommodate two trees more so than maybe some of the more normal sized North Glen lots in the other zone districts. So that more than 2,000 square feet, that's where you're going to see most of those lots, is in those large lot zone districts.
And this is only going to be triggered if it's something that someone wants to, make improvements to their.
That's correct. If they want to come in and do the option of xeriscape, so they want to take out all their grass and put in all rock, then we would say, hey, these are the requirements that you would need to have there for minimum plantings in order to do the 100% rock. And we would take into account any existing vegetation that was there on the property as well, so.
What are the size of the trees, or is there type of trees that are listed in there?
We haven't gone into
Yeah, from baby
specifics
tree.
on that. We do have listings of trees that we recommend be planted in the community if people do ask. But we're not going into the specifics on it could be an ornamental tree, it could be a shade tree, it could be a pine tree. It just really depends on kind of what the personal preference is of the property owner.
Thank you.
Councilmember Long?
I have two questions. One, and I don't know if this is pertinent or not. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Fire pits. Kind of a bugaboo in my mind, having been on the fire district for some years. And we still allow those fire pits. Is there anything that might be addressed with this, or is it out of context?
So this is not necessarily applicable to what we're entertaining tonight. However, with fire pits, if it's less than 3 feet in diameter, it is allowed under the fire code. If it's a fire pit greater than 3 feet in diameter, we can respond to complaints and deal with it accordingly per the code.
That's it?
Yep,
Even in front yards?
yep.
Thank you.
My last question is, sorry,
No, it's okay.
Yep.
enforcement.
It's probably gonna be me.
Code enforcement?
Yes. So I will tell you, historically, in the Greens, we've had multiple issues with people doing open fire pits in their front yards. We've had instances where people use the fire pits in order to instigate conflict with their neighbors. We've had multiple challenges with that in the past. In Ward 2, we've had multiple complaints about people burning trash in their backyards, and we've responded to that accordingly. Typically, once again, if it's within a 3-foot fire pit, we engage the fire department, we go out and do the observations and respond to the complaints. We are not out proactively enforcing fire pits, but we do respond to them when the calls do come. I can honestly say that in the last handful of years since COVID started, we haven't had hardly any complaints regarding fire pits.
Shifting gears, enforcement of this.
Yes.
Code.
Yes. So one of the main drivers behind these landscaping amendments and the parking on unapproved surface is in order to make it easier for the code staff to go out and administer enforcement, because primarily where this was generated from was our code staff handles a large amount of minimum landscaping requirements. So typically, if your grass is over a certain height and there's weeds and you mow it and it stays mostly weed-free, there's a percentage breakdown, you're good. Once you exceed that threshold, you got to go in and re-landscape. And so where we were finding challenges over the last several years, especially due to COVID, is that people either couldn't find contractors or couldn't afford to pay for what our current standards have in place. This was intended to be an accommodation and a management strategy to better help alleviate those cost burdens and also make it easier for DIY. So part of the question earlier about the trees is that what we would be looking at is this would be a more cost-effective approach than, say, replacing the entire front lawn with sod versus, individual trees. And in terms of caliper size, it's really, we have a rule where even if the vegetation doesn't meet the requirement, if it grows over a certain period and will grow into that percent coverage, we will accommodate for that as well. But really, a lot of this came out of enforcement and the challenges that we were facing since COVID and post-COVID.
To what extent are you allowed to make recommendations to the homeowner?
So,
if any?
So typically what we do with the code staff is we sit down and we work with them, and we actually currently have a cheat sheet that we hand out to them for what you can do to bring into compliance. We also provide the native seeds and grasses as well as also the different species. What this will do is we're going to update all of that, and it will basically be a new handout that we'll work with those residents that are facing those challenges.
Sounds like a wonderful solution. Thank you.
Yep.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm actually hoping to zero-scape my yard, and I think it's one of the larger ones. That's what I was asking. But I actually have a silly question. It's probably a silly question regarding the residential block party. Just a clarification. It's pretty straightforward, but I see there's, a different classification, other than special events. What if somebody wanted to have live music at their block party, like a live band or something? Would that then bump them out of the residential block party category?
We still do have regulations for noise, so they would have to follow
Yeah,
those.
comply with noise. But if
Yes.
they are complying with the noise, if it's like a one-man band with a guitar and,
It would be considered a residential
Still
private party.
thank you. That's just a clarification I need.
This question actually is for Diana. So I wasn't sure if we had a list of residents that had signed in, or I don't know when they signed in to the mayor's mingle, if we had their contact information. Because I got direct questions about the parking surfaces, and there was a resident that will be thrilled with this. And I don't know how we can,
We do not. We have the names only, and actually, we didn't even used to collect names because it was kind of an invasion of privacy for our city attorney. We just started collecting names because finance feels like they need to have a list of names of who we're feeding. So yeah, that's the only reason we have their names. If you remember their name, we can always try and look them up via some other way. But no, there's no contact information on there.
okay. Well, I just know that piece, it's going to be really appreciated.
Right, yeah, and you know what, we could probably do an article. It's too late to get into the April connection, but we can put it in the May connection and just tell people, hey, we've changed. They'll say, what's the UDO? And then we'll explain that, and then we'll say there's changes and this is where to go look.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Well, and I have to say, I think it's beneficial to read the small print. Because I was like, why would I have a sign spinner in my front yard? Oh, non-residential sign.
Anything else? You're good?
No, we're good. I thought that was great. Thank you so much for your work. It's very thorough.
Thank you.
And we are done. Great. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So do we have consensus to move forward as presented?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that, Brooke. I appreciate it. All right, public invited to be heard. Opportunity for public comment. Don't see any public friends. Is there anyone who would like to speak to council? No. Is there anyone on the phone who would like to speak to council? You can press *6 to unmute. Okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Section 4.5D of the City Charter for legal consultation and advice regarding the Police Department workplace assessment.
So moved.
Second.
All right, please open the vote.
The vote is open. I will close that vote, and the motion to amend to executive session passes unanimously.
We will adjourn to executive session. You can take a few minutes to tend to your needs while we break down technology.